Welcome to the Anonymous Andrew podcast. Life and the choices we make. The choices other people make. Why we choose to ignore the red flags. Red flags like gaslighting, cheating, addiction, mental illness, and much more. What role do they play in relationships? Follow me each week as we discuss these topics with anonymous guests and experts to hopefully become better humans, resulting in better choices. And like I say, been there, still doing that. Now on to the show. Greetings, Anonymous Andrew, back with you. Life and the choices we make. Episode 53. Today, I have a gentleman, Nick Jarvis. And Nick Jarvis is a recovery coach. And Nick has, when I read his bio and I booked him, I'm stumbling here because it's difficult to explain. The concept that he brings is something that I found very near and dear to me. When somebody goes into recovery, alcoholic addiction or any type of addiction, and especially if they use the 12 steps, and they're successful at putting the drug or drink down or whatever it is, and they follow the 12 steps, and the 12 steps are a map that are given to us to follow and hopefully find our way through life. And they work if you follow them and all the suggestions. But there are, I can't even count how many, but there are many of us who find ourselves lost after several years, 5, 6, 7, in my case, 8 years. We managed to put the substance down and followed the 12 steps, but still can't find that sense of purpose in life. And that's exactly where I am. So I'm excited to talk to Nick because he's going to explain to us what he does and what it's all about. So up next, Nick Jarvis with Empowered Recovery. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Anonymous Andrew podcast, Life and the Choices We Make. Today, I have a special guest. I'm very intrigued to hear what this gentleman has to say. With me today is Nick Jarvis. And Nick Jarvis is a recovery coach, an author, a speaker, and he consults with recovery centers. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining me. So, Nick, my audience knows that I'm in recovery, 8 years from alcohol abuse, and of course drugs too, but alcohol was my drug of choice. You are also in recovery, I understand, and more than that, you branched out. So you're a recovery coach, and everything else I just mentioned. Tell us your story and why you're here. Love to hear all about it.
I'd be glad to. And again, thank you. It's always a privilege and an honor to be in a place where I can tell my story from this perspective, and hopefully people want to hear it. That's a blessing to me, as there was definitely a point where I didn't have much story to tell, or there was nobody listening. So, or I should say, there was little hope in what I was saying. Today, that's not really the case. So, yeah, I find it, I'm going to start from where I am today, actually, because I find it sometimes irrelevant to talk about my actual addiction and alcoholism as it was. I find it less impactful sometimes, because we all know what what alcoholism is and what it does and what our lifestyle is like. And recovery, on the other hand, is a whole other animal. And that's the world that I live in, and that's where I meet people, and that's what I like to talk about. So, starting with what I do, where I am, gratefully just celebrated 14 years clean on July 4th, and have just this unbelievable life that sometimes I think I'm like, how is this even happening? How did my day even go this way? Because it's just unbelievable. I have an amazing partnership with my wife. We've been married 7 years, I think. I'm bad at keeping track of
Me too.
that time frame, but we've been together since 2011. So anyway, we're both in recovery. We both are passionate about people in recovery and helping them get to where they're trying to go. We have two beautiful kids. We live in Northeast Ohio, a little bit south of Akron, where, as you know, probably AA was born.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. And together we are recovery coaches. We meet people in their recovery and help them get to where they're trying to go. And I'll talk about that much more in a little bit as far as what we're doing there. And we most recently, this is a passion project of ours on the consulting side. We are helping restart a nonprofit women's recovery center here in Northeast Ohio. It's faith-based, it's long-term, it's an incredible mission, and her and I are in the director's seat for the time being, helping it kind of get revamped and sustainable. The founder who started it had to step away, and we've stepped in and are getting that up and running again. So a very, very fun, creative, amazing experience to impact this community here. And I can talk a little bit more about that as well. But, what I'm trying to paint the picture of here is that as a family, we are living out our passions, and we're working together, and we're working at our pace. We are healing through that experience in a lot of different ways. We have these amazing opportunities to connect with other people and serve, but also be compensated for that. And I mean, we try every day to live through what God's will is for us. And that's through our work, through our relationships, through our family. Like, everything that we're doing is just has that common thread. And I mean, the days are just incredible. Not to say that there's no challenges, but we have such a full life. That's what I'm trying to communicate. It's such a full life, so much love, so much support, so many opportunities, abundance in all these ways. And it's just the life that is so far from the life of addiction, where, the size of my life was constricted, narrow. I couldn't see past the tip of my nose, as they say. I had, no relationships that were giving life back to me. I had no income that was giving life back to me, or opportunities. My life was so constricted. And the more I drank, the more I used, the more constricted it got. It just fed that whole cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Today, my life is in such a different place, to where drugs and alcohol, not to say that I would never drink again, or I would never use again, or whatever. That's not what I'm saying at all. My life is in such a different place that drugs and alcohol aren't even in the same realm, if that makes any sense. I mean, they are, it's like they're in two different stratospheres. Do I never think about it? That's not true. I mean, things happen, things come and go. The ideas are still there or whatever, but the actual desire has been removed, and it's been removed a long time ago. Thank God. So how I got to that place is kind of a long and winding journey that I probably don't have time to fully explain. But I got started in my recovery in 12-step meetings. I got sober in Los Angeles in a long-term recovery house, actually. And that was all about changing behavior, getting into 12-step meetings, working the steps. I mean, multiple meetings a day, having a sponsor, learning how to pray, working the steps, sponsoring guys, repeat, wash, repeat, that thing.
Very familiar with it.
Yeah. And, for the first time in my life, and again, I was a youngster, I was 19. I started growing. I started developing skills. I started having coping mechanisms. I was able to start building a life with this foundation that I was being given through AA and NA. And I started running recovery houses at that time as well. And that was an amazing experience to be able to work in this field and help other guys kind of do what I was doing. It felt very natural because it wasn't like I had to go out and learn some trade, go to school to learn a trade, to come back and serve. It was just a matter of using my lived experience to serve, and my other skills that I might have had at the time, like, communication or whatever. So I felt very empowered in that situation, again, because I was doing what I was naturally gifted with, which was talking to people and seeing some insights and talking to people about those insights and trying to help people change and listen. So did that for a few years. I ended up getting an opportunity to start a place in Kentucky, of all places. So I moved from LA to rural BFE, Kentucky.
Wow.
And spent many years there trying to get some houses up and going, and different parts to that, as far as other businesses connected to it, and women's houses, bigger houses, smaller houses, just kind of expanding and playing with that model a little bit. This was all in the for-profit sector, so different than what I'm doing today. But that's actually where I met my wife. So she was getting clean around the same time I was moving to Kentucky, and went to the center that I went out to start helping with. And we got together about 1.5 years, 2 years after she got clean, and started building our life together. Again, serving people together, sponsoring men, women, running groups or classes, and just getting all up in people's business. I mean, that was our life for many years. What I learned through that experience, along with, how to get people from day one of sobriety to day 90, right? As much as that was what the center was about, what was actually coming through to me was more about what people do when they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years sober, clean, and how their life looks and the decisions that they make. Because we were a long-term program. So people would stay there for about a year. They'd move out with maybe another person from the program. They'd stay connected. They'd be around for several years in the community. So again, I got to see the jump between 0 days clean and 90 days. But again, more importantly, what happens at that 3-year mark, that 5-year mark, when people stop drinking, stop using, addiction is not really the problem anymore. They get to this other place where it's like, now what? All right.
Right.
Now what am I doing? Well, why am I here? What's the point of all this? What am I going to do now? And in hindsight, that was such a valuable experience, because I found that a lot of people in recovery, myself included, didn't have the skills or the support to make decisions that would further grow their spiritual life, their personal life, their financial life, relationships, like every part of their lives. We lacked those skills. And this actually happened to me when I was 7 years clean. I bottomed out. I was depressed. I was stuck financially. I was hopeless. I mean, I literally bottomed out. And being clean that long, I'm thinking to myself, like, what's wrong with me? I mean, I'm going to meetings. I've got a sponsor. I'm working the steps. I mean, am I doing a thorough 10 step every day? No. Like, am I, praying and meditating to the fullest every single day? No. But I'm doing the best that I can, right? I mean, I'm working these steps. I'm doing all the things. And what came back to me was also like, you should be grateful for the life that you have, right? And I was grateful. I mean, I had a good life. I had a decent job. I was married. I had, money, and I was clean and all those things, right? But what I realized, and this is a bit of a tangent, what I realized is I was practicing what I like to call gratitude by comparison, where I'm grateful only based on what I used to have or not have, or what someone else has or doesn't have. I'm comparing my current situation, to something else, right? And therefore I'm grateful, instead of really experiencing gratitude. Like, this is what I'm so grateful for, this experience, right? Regardless of anything else, I'm grateful. And I wasn't. I wasn't happy with my life. I didn't like my job. I knew here's why I was discontent. And this is where I'm jumping into what I do now. I realized that I wasn't living my full potential, that I wasn't listening to what God's will was for me. I wasn't exercising my talents. I wasn't leaning into the life that I was really meant to live. I was sort of standing on the sidelines and just maintaining this lifestyle that I had by default built for myself. And once that message came through to me, I realized how much power I had over my life. And when that happened, I started making some decisions that were life-changing, career-wise, relationship-wise, all those things just rocketed me into this other lifestyle of intuition, growth, abundance, just what am I meant to do? How am I supposed to live this life that's been given to me? Why did I go through addiction in the first place? And why am I here to tell the story? Like, what's the point of all this? And then actually trying to answer that question and then live it through my experience. So I began to get introduced to recovery coaching, which is a totally different relationship than I've ever encountered before at the time. Different than therapy, different than counseling, different than sponsorship or mentorship or a friend having coffee. It's like, it's a professional who's dedicating their time and energy to me to find what's within me and develop that further with my, my leadership. Like, I'm the one steering the ship. I'm the one deciding what I do and what I don't do. And the recovery coach is the guide. It's the same thing as a football coach. I mean, the football coach sees the player and that's his hangups or what's standing in the way of him becoming an exceptional player, and he's coaching him, right? He's seeing it from an outside perspective. He's working on his craft. He is good at what he does as a coach. And so when I experienced that kind of relationship, I just felt so empowered and supported to make decisions that were possibly risky. I mean, in my mind, in my 7-8 year in recovery mind, where I had been sort of conditioned to don't rock the boat, don't make any big decisions, sobriety first, just maintain this lifestyle that you should be grateful for, right? Now, I'm not saying that sobriety is not important or essential, because obviously it is for me. But when I was empowered with the ability to make decisions based on what I felt like and what I felt like God felt like was right for me at the time, my life just took a totally different trajectory. And that's the path I've been on for the last going on 7 years now. So what me and my wife do at this point is we meet people at 3 years clean, probably 3, 4, 5 years and beyond. They are typically, I don't know, working a job that they don't really like. A lot of people in the construction field or in office work or just different things that are good, stable jobs for people early in recovery, right? They're easy to get into. Sometimes the people have felonies. Like, you just kind of transition into these jobs because you need a job. You need something stable, right? But after a certain point, we find some people are just, they know they're meant to be more than that, and they're feeling the pain around that. This is not just about jobs. It's also about spirituality. It's about relationships. It's about, everything that's attached to people's lives.
Purpose.
So anyway, we meet, yes, purpose. Exactly. So we meet people at these places, and we give them the support and the insights maybe that they might need. A lot of times it's just permission. It's like, hey, yeah, you don't need anybody's permission. You can make that decision. We might point out, like, these are some of the things that we see that are on the radar. But here are, you have the permission. You already have what you need to be able to make this decision. And it's amazing how many times people with just a slight shift in perspective, their whole life can change. It's similar to flying an airplane. I don't remember the exact measurements, but you turn up an airplane 1 degree and you send yourself and that airplane in a completely different direction. You're miles away from where you would have been otherwise. Because sometimes people feel like you have to do a complete 180 when you're in your life, right? And a lot of times, at least from what our experience has been, it's not that extreme. Sometimes it's just a tiny little 1 degree change to the right, and you're in a totally different direction. It might not happen all at the same time or right away, but you can feel when you're headed in a different direction in your life, spiritually, emotionally, financially, whatever it might be. So again, we've been kind of living that path for the last 7 years or so. And I'm not saying that we have the answer by any means. All I'm trying to explain is that we are very passionate about what life is like beyond initial recovery, right? We're looking past the getting sober stage. We reserve that getting sober stage to treatment centers and recovery centers and places where people are making that first transition. When we're looking at recovery coaching and all the other things that we do, we are speaking to people past that. And that's our passion, is who people are on the inside, who they're meant to be, what they're feeling like, after the drugs and alcohol are out of the picture, where they want to go with their life, the things that they want to do, the messages that are living inside of them that they want to get out there in some way. Again, whether that's books or writing or just talking to people, whatever that might be, everybody's got a message. Everybody's got some kind of story, right?
Yep.
Here we are. That's what we're doing today.
Yep. Podcasting. Right.
Yeah. So we're just advocates for people making the jump, putting themselves out there, trusting God, trusting whatever it is they believe in, trusting themselves. I don't disagree with 12-step meetings. I don't think that people shouldn't go. I think it's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful, incredible system and program and community. I have felt that it doesn't always serve people.
Correct.
After that initial getting clean. If somebody's trying to get sober, they're on the streets, they're just beginning, go to AA, go to meetings, find a place that you fit in or whatever. I always urge people to start there, because that's what it's for. That's what it was designed to do, right? 5-10 years down the road, I find that it's rare to get the right kind of support around, again, relationships, financial concepts, career moves, those things. That's not what it's for. It's to support each other, getting clean and sober, and I think to connect people with a higher power. Me personally, I think I missed the higher power point in a way that I just didn't connect with it. So I found that through other ways and means, some of which was just me living out in the world, not going anywhere, not going to meetings, not going to church or whatever, just living my life and trusting, learning what my instincts and intuition are telling me, and thereby finding God's will for me and connecting with that. More recently, within the last 6 to 9 months, I've been involved in more Christianity and that type of realm, and that's brought me to God in a different way and in a different perspective. And so I guess if I have any suggestions on that, not that anybody's asking, but just to flow with what I'm talking about here, I always just urge people to just keep seeking. I mean, if there's a meeting that you find, that's great. That's great. If it feels like it's not totally fitting you, seek another one, or seek another place to go to, or just continually seek what it is that you're looking for, that you feel like you're looking for. And I think eventually you find something, or at least you're led to another place to where you can find something similar or just continue on the path. But once I stopped seeking, and that's what happened to me at 6-7 years clean, probably started around 5, and I was just stuck in complacency and maintenance. But once I stopped seeking, I stopped growing, and therefore my life stopped changing. I started feeling all the things, and relapse became a real thing. So I always tell people, this is my belief, and I tell this to everybody that I talk to in the recovery field and the people I work with, that I believe relapse is 100% preventable. I think there's a cure for relapse, and it's growth. That is what I believe the cure is just growth. Now, growing through the 12 steps, growing through religion or spirituality or whatever that is, but growth is what I believe to be the answer. If we're not growing, we're
stagnant.
Exactly. And when we're stagnant, we're slipping back. We're either going one way or the other, going downward or upward. And I prefer today, at least, to go upward. And there's days where that's not the case. And it's, it's life, right? But I think if we can focus our target on growth, then that becomes something very unique to the individual. It's like, what do you need in order to grow? What do you need in order to heal? I can't tell you what you need in order to heal from that thing, or what you need in order to grow. That becomes very individualized, but we can support each other in what all of us need. And we don't have to make this complicated. It's not complicated. It's very simple.
Yeah.
Let's help each other grow. And how do we do that?
And that's all right. So wow, I've been jotting down notes and questions as you were explaining that. Nick, you are, what's the right word? It's like I'm looking in a mirror. Just so the audience knows, we discussed this earlier. We have the same sober date, July 4th.
Yeah, right.
And I am in that exact, exact place that you described at 8 years sober, stagnant. By the way, I just want to also explain to the audience about how recovery works or doesn't, or it could be triggering. The minute you said you moved to Kentucky, I got triggered because bourbon was my alcohol of choice. And what comes from Kentucky? That's
lots of bourbon.
Lots of bourbon. Mm-hmm, so when you said that, the first picture in my mind was Maker's Mark, and it's just interesting how we can be 8 years sober, but something is just naming a state can trigger somebody. Not that I want to drink. It was just all of a sudden I found myself, wow, Maker's Mark, bourbon. And technically you can't call bourbon unless it's made in Kentucky, I believe, or something like that. I found that the same thing with me at 8 years of sobriety, which I just celebrated like you, July 4th. And out of this relationship now, almost 10 months, I am stagnant and I don't know what my purpose is. So all of the things that you just discussed or told us about is where I'm at. Even down to the gratitude. Yes, I am happy and grateful that I am sober and live this lifestyle. And like you said, drugs and alcohol are just a separate universe, right? Or you say, I think you used the word stratosphere. It's just not, it's not an option for me. I don't think about it. The obsession has been lifted. And I think you touched upon something. AA, a 12-step, is great for the beginner. If they're struggling and they want to get sober, yes, go to a 12-step meeting. But this is where the 12-step system, in my opinion, and I think you may have agree, fails in 8, 9, 10, 11 years of sobriety. Doesn't, yes, if you follow the 12 steps and do 10, 11, and 12, it's supposed to, you carry the message and you continue. But that growth that you were talking about, and that word stagnant is what's my purpose? Now, I can say that at 63 and 8 years sober, I started a podcast. So maybe that's my purpose. And that's where I begin to grow. And I have been, because in these last 6 months of doing this and staying single from this last horrible relationship, I've grown a lot already. But so somebody like myself, and the story that you just told about yourself is, we would come to you. So I have 8 years of sobriety, but I feel stuck. I'm not happy at my job. While I might make good money, the job is not something I'm happy with. We would come to you, and you would coach about finding my purpose.
Yeah. So I want to clarify purpose real quick, because I think that that's a buzzword a lot in our culture right now. What I actually mean by that is living a life with purpose, because a lot of people get hung up on what is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, the one thing. Like, am I a teacher? Am I an author? Am I a speaker? You know, we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into having to pick a thing. And maybe there is a thing to pick, but a lot of times, and especially when I encounter people who are asking that question, it's more helpful to think about, how do I live more of a life with purpose? So what we do is we look at each area of our lives, and I break it down into 5 sections, because for me that's simpler, and in my experience, everything boils down to these 5 areas of someone's life, and it's spirituality, relationships, health, that's physical and mental, career, as in what we do for work, and finances, as in our money, what we do with our money. So we look at each of those 5 areas. Again, that's spirituality, relationships, health, career, and finance. And we take an honest, you could call it an inventory. You could call it, take stock of what's going on there, right? And thinking about, okay, how do I feel about these areas of my life? Do I feel like I am thriving to the point where I could be? I think everybody by default wants to have, be thriving in all of these areas. Pretty much everyone is not.
No.
Pretty much everyone has at least 1 or 2 of those areas where they're falling short, and they feel like, man, I know I could do better. I know that I could have more. I know that my life could be better in this area. And that's what I go after, is that feeling of, I know that there's something more here for myself, right? There's a pain, there's a discomfort there.
Mm-hmm.
So once we start talking about that, we keep going after it. We just keep uncovering, looking at things, and coming up with, usually people already have the answer in there somewhere. They already know what they need to do or what they want. It's just a matter of making space for that. And with coaching, it's a consistent, constructive conversation that, it builds upon itself. A lot of times people have relationships, friends, mentors, sponsors, whatever, where that conversation is important and it's impactful, but it's not necessarily consistent enough to make progress, right? And to have that accountability. And I'm not trying to be here, pitching coaching, but what I'm trying to explain around it, because a lot of people don't know what it is. They've never experienced that. And especially in the 12-step world. And that's where I come from, right? Like that world. And I talk about these things, they just don't know. I didn't know, again, for the first 7-8 years. I had no idea that this kind of thing was even out there.
Right.
And to me, that's just a shame. I want it to be something that's at least an option. It's not for everybody. Not everybody needs it or wants it. But again, we're paying attention to how, what the person feels like on the inside that they know that there's more. They know that they can do better, or they can have more in these particular areas of their life. And then we start putting action steps behind that. Like, again, people a lot of times already know what they want or what they need to do. And sometimes that happens in the first conversation, and people's lives start changing immediately because they've had that insight. Like, oh, I've been sort of walking with blinders on.
Yep.
And all I had to do was just look in that direction, and now my life is totally changing, you know? So yeah, living a life with purpose means, to me, we're intentional about what we're doing in our life, and it's not just this default future that we're setting up for ourselves where we have this life that we built and we're just letting that sort of push us around all day. Because part of my life is that way sometimes, and definitely was more so at 7 years clean, where my life was just, the circumstances around my life were dictating what I do every day. And I was just this kind of like passive guy along for the ride, and again, to an extent, that's an adventure and it's okay. And I liked that, but there was a lot of pain around that because I knew that I had more power, more potential, had more to share. I had more to give. I just knew there could be more.
Yeah.
So,
and I wrote down when you went with 1 through 5, spirituality, relationships, health, mental and physical, career, and finances. I checked off 3 of those that I know that, and I'll tell you, relationships, career, and finances are probably the 3 of my weakest, I guess, areas that I know that mentally and physically I have worked very hard on that. Spirituality, I know I have that, but obviously, as many people know, this podcast is all about relationships, and I suck at relationships. It's as simple as that, and not necessarily romantic. It's relationship of any kind, which I can get into another whole episode. So somebody like myself would come to you with, I have this list of these 5 concepts, and I would come to you and you would help me with finding purpose in relationships, career, and finances for myself. So that's what, yeah. Okay.
that's probably where that would lead, because you are noticing that those areas are standing out to you. And once that conversation begins, it's probably going to uncover areas and things that you feel like you want to do, or feel like you want to start doing, or begin thinking about, or, it'll just lead to ideas, hopefully, and pathways that maybe we couldn't see before. But you would lead the way to, that's the important thing about coaching. It's not about like, this is my process that you're going to have to conform to and follow. It's more about, hey, here's some tools, try them on. What comes back is, okay, that worked for you, that didn't work for you. You probably come up with some ideas. We try those out. We let the word coach comes from the idea of a coachman or a taxi, where you take people where they want to go. And that's what it's about. It's not, again, I'm taking you where I think you should go. Here's the beautiful thing about coaching. And I have to say this because we're going through it right now in real time with this nonprofit sober living home that we're starting. Because the coaching is a strong element to what we're doing there. And I can explain more about that if you want to. But basically what I'm trying to say is that the relationship between the coach and the person being coached is not conditional. There aren't conditions around you have to believe what I believe. You
Right.
have to conform to what I think you should conform to, or you have to do what I think you should do. Right. Like it's very much a level playing field to where you don't lack anything. You're not looking for my my
Expertise.
yeah, I mean, I am trained in what I do and I practice what I do and I'm very intentional about what I do, but you're not lacking anything. You're in fact um you have everything you need to get to that next place. It's just a matter of making space for that constructive, consistent conversation so that those things can be revealed. And that sounds a little hokey and stuff that people sometimes can't totally grasp, but it's if you think about when was the last time, when do we as people in this culture have those consistent constructive conversations with people? I mean, it's pretty much never. I mean,
Never.
I don't have any relationship aside from my wife at this point, and even that's not that consistent to where we actually have conversations like that, like where I make space for myself to talk about these 5 areas of my life where I feel like I'm falling short, how to build on that, like where my progress is at, and just keeping track of all those things. I don't do that with anybody. I mean, I've never done that with a sponsor. I've never done that with a
Correct.
mentor. I mean,
Nope.
it just doesn't exist, you know?
No.
So I just preach from the mountaintops the idea of a coaching relationship. People do pay for that, right? It's a service. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes energy. It's not the same as sitting down having coffee with a friend. And the downside is that a lot of times people, especially newer in recovery, don't necessarily have the financial means to do something like that. So that's where we're experimenting here in our nonprofit with, like, how do we serve people through coaching, from a donation based or pay what you can type of situation, to where they can get started and hopefully get to another place financially where they can afford to pay for it themselves or find their own coach or possibly become a coach themselves, and just kind of like feed that whole cycle there. That's happening right now in our organization. We're trying to figure that out as far as how we do that, only because we believe in the power of coaching and how much impact it can have with people, not just who live at our sober living home, but who are outside of it in the community, you know, a year sober maybe, or 2 years sober, and are just trying to live a better life, you know, and to live the life that they're dreaming of. And I'll say this real quick, one more thing. I feel like, especially us as alcoholics, addicts, whatever you want to call us, people who have struggled with addiction, we're like a different, we're a lot of times we're the outsiders of the world. We're the subculture. We don't necessarily fit in the box a lot of times. I know even as a kid, I was like always doing, I didn't quite fit in, as they say. I mean, you hear it in 12-step meetings all the time, right? Or people sharing their story, but
the square peg in the round hole.
Yeah, like we just don't fit in the box. And a lot of times our experience is that we don't fit in the box. In order to get clean, we have to like start fitting in the box. We have to get that stability. And then all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, we're like fully in the box and having to stay there forever in our minds. And it's like, no, we don't. Just because we're in recovery doesn't mean we have to fit in the box. We don't have to work like everybody else. We don't have to do things like everybody else. And I'm not saying we're special. I'm just saying that we're all unique. We all have these things about us that are probably a little anti-establishment, or we're just like, we have gifts. We're unique. We're special. We are individuals, right? And our whole mission, be it our recovery center, which is called Beneath the Shade. Our coaching, our consulting, everything we do is about like, let's make space to listen to your individual experience and your unique talents, your gifts, whatever it is that's there within you. And let's make space for that so that it can grow and flourish and expand out into the world the way that it's meant to, instead of constricting you or someone to, this is the process that you need to follow, or else you're not going to make it, or else we can't be together. Like that's just very exclusionary. And we've been there, done that. And that's not what we're about today. So,
and it's funny you said that, because my opening into my intro to my podcast has been there, still doing that. So yeah, because I feel like I am. And everything that you just talked about is exactly where I'm at. I went through the same process, and here I am at 8 years sobriety, and I am looking for my purpose. So Nick, you have an amazing story, and I this whole coaching concept is new to me. I was just discussing this with another guest, that coaching is fairly new in society. I mean, I grew up in a world where if you had issues, whether it be mental or physical, Western medicine, you go to a therapist, a psychologist, a doctor. But this coaching concept is something new, and I'm finding it to be fascinating. So, all right, let's wrap this up, Nick. Where can people find you or your organization?
Yeah. First place to probably start is just my website for me personally, and that's nickjavas.co. Nick, JAVAS.co. That's kind of the landing page for essentially what I do and why I do it. Our nonprofit is called beneaththeshade.org is the website. Like beneath the shade tree, right?
Okay.
Wonderful, amazing organization, amazing people. We're working with women who a lot of times don't have means, and setting them up to not only live in a transitional living space for up to 14 months, but also make space for them to get coaching, to get connected with the community, to build a business if they need to just do all the things that we were just talking about, but doing so in a transitional living space. I'm very excited about it. And my wife and I are very passionate about what we're doing. So that if someone's interested in that mission for whatever reason, our website there is the best place to start. And I always ask people to, if they feel inspired to be involved in some way, like, let's talk. Whether that's volunteer or donate or service of some kind, we connect people through Zoom. We just amazing with technology now again, and we're doing it right now. Like there's so many opportunities to share messages, and just the world is so much more connected now. Even though we're in Northeast Ohio, people can serve and people can be blessed from anywhere, all over the world. Instantly. Anywhere. It's just amazing. So that's where we are online. So those two places are good place to start.
I will put all of that in the show notes, and I'm guessing you're also on social media.
Sort of. I am personally, but I find it draining, honestly.
It is.
Even as an organization, we don't really do it other than to give updates on certain things that we're doing. It's kind of easy to stay connected with like the local community here on Facebook. But me personally, I find it
is draining.
I don't know, draining and distracting. And I mean, I'm on this journey actually right now where I don't even have a smartphone. I'm just like, I'm trying to connect authentically around the
okay.
world with me, the people in my world and outside, and just spend more time listening and being
I
and
get
just
it.
slowing down. Yeah, you know
I
what
get
I'm
it.
saying.
I
Yeah.
for the last for 8 years of sobriety, I refused to put Facebook on my phone.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be that another addiction, right? Because Facebook,
Right.
they talk about Facebook and Instagram. They hit that dopamine center of your brain every time you swipe and all that stuff. Unfortunately, today with the podcast, if I don't have access to it, I can't keep up with. But you're right; it's overwhelming and it's distracting. So. Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It sounds like everything that you, your wife, and the foundation are doing is amazing. There is so many resources out there for somebody struggling with alcohol or drug addiction. And it sounds like you are doing great work to help people find their purpose, especially if they've got some couple of years under their belt. So, any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us?
I mean, I think I've said my highlights, but I wanted to thank you for making space for that message because I find it doesn't have a lot of space in our world right now. So thank you for what you're doing and being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. And it's impacted me. So if that's as far as it goes, I'm good with that, but I'm sure it'll go further. And again, thank you for taking the time to create this space.
My pleasure. And I will promote you on my social media page. So Nick, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a terrific weekend.
You too. Thanks you.
I would like to thank Nick Jarvis very much for coming on and sharing that message. Folks, sobriety, or recovery, I should say, from any addiction. And in today's world, it used to be only alcoholism. Today it is drugs, sex, gambling, pornography, codependency, and the list goes on. If you indulge too much in something and it makes your life unmanageable, you have a problem with it. You have to put that first. Yes, this podcast is about relationships and the mistakes that I have made, but I am sober 8 years. So either you go back before 2015, I'm still, with or without the alcohol in my life, I'm still making the same mistakes. The alcohol obviously made it a lot worse, and I did a lot of collateral damage, a lot. But today, I can at least hold my head up and know that I'm not a drunk. I put my sobriety first. This morning I got up, took my bike down to the boardwalk, and then went to a meeting. 9 years ago, I'd still be sleeping right now and wake up with a serious hangover. All right, folks, thank you for listening. And as always, if you need to make a choice, please, I beg of you to choose wisely. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for leaving a review. Hint, hint. And until next time, ciao.